This is my favourite. It's my Lamy fountain pen, which I've written nearly everything with. First draft goes into this old notebook, which is as scruffy as anything. Looks like that. And then...
Hold it up a bit so they can see.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah.
And then when I transfer that to my screen, it's a way of editing, and I change things as I go. But initially, it all comes... Most of it comes out in biro. No, not biro, fountain pen. Really old-fashioned fountain pen. So I think it's quite appropriate. If you're doing historical stories like I do, writing in a fountain pen in an old leather-bound notebook, it seems quite appropriate for it.
Very good. So what made you want to become a writer?
See these books here? I knew Jan was going to ask me this one. They're called The Adventures of the Secret Seven. There's a whole box set which I haven't opened because I had all the originals when I was younger. And the Secret Seven were 7 little kids, had a gang in England, and they used to go around having adventures, and they used to capture robbers and burglars and smugglers and get a reward every time they did it. And I love these. I started reading them when I was 7, and they were the most exciting things I'd ever read.
It's all right.
The most exciting things I'd ever read. And I really wanted to be a Secret Seven. I used to pester my mum and to get me an English raincoat, because that's what the Secret Seven wore. The uniform was thick English raincoats, cub caps, thick woolen scarves, and rubber-soled shoes. And so I wanted to be one. So I dressed up in my raincoat, put my cub cap on, and wandered around the streets of Narrogin, where we lived in the country, and tried looking for bank robbers and burglars and smugglers. And I never found any. And there I was in the summer holidays, wandering around Narrogin in 42-degree heat with my raincoat on, and people laughed at me, and it was understandably. And so after a while, I decided, instead of being the Secret Seven, maybe I'd write about them. So I got one of Enid Blyton's books, the author of them, and it's called Go Ahead Secret Seven, and I copied it, a lot of it, into a thick exercise book, and tried writing my own story, and I called it The Adventures of the Secret Ape. And I made an extra member, Norman, the clever one, and he solved all the crimes, and he captured all the robbers and all the burglars and all the smugglers. And every time he did this, the police gave him a huge reward. And at the end of the book, he ended up as the richest kid in the world, which I thought was a really good ending. And I showed it to my brothers, and they liked it, and I took it to school and showed it to my friends, and I suddenly became really popular for a little while, because people wanted to know what happened in it. And the plot was good, because it was Enid Blyton's plot, it wasn't really mine. So I think that's when I decided I was going to be a writer, but that's a really young age. But it took me forever to get published. I grew up and became a really old adult before I had my books first published. What you got?
I think we better tell everyone that we are such Instagram novices that it took a little while for us to set everything up, and I wasn't sure it was working, but I can see on your phone that lots of people have joined and waved, and I think I've just learned how to wave at them. So we wave by pressing the emoticon button on the phone, but you might want to give them a physical wave to say, hello, it's lovely having an audience.
It is, absolutely.
And say, hi everyone, thanks for joining in.
Normally I have 3 classes sitting on the floor in front of me, and I drone on for an hour, and their bums get sore. And I feel really, really sorry for them.
You mentioned before Enid Blyton, and I know she's been your heroine for a long time, and you refer to her as Saint Enid every now and again. But the other great thing about writing was how it introduced you to girls, and you were a member of the Argonauts Club, I believe. So why not tell that little story to everyone?
I sent a story to the Argonauts Club. It was on the radio on ABC every afternoon at 5 o'clock. And all the kids in Australia listened to it because there wasn't any televisions in the country. And you could send in stories and poems. And some kids even sent in pictures they'd drawn to a radio show. But anyhow, I had... we'd moved to Narrogin, and I hated my teacher. She was Mrs. Simpson. She was crabby and sarcastic and mean, and had a steel ruler I used to whack on the knuckles with. And the principal, Mr. Palmer, was psycho. I hated him with a passion. He had a collection of canes in his cupboard, in his gun cupboard in his office, all different thicknesses, and he'd whack kids with them whenever he got a bit bored, I think. Anyhow, I wrote a story to the Argonauts Club about my school, and normally they'd send you back a card saying, "Dear Norman, thank you very much for your contribution, keep on writing." This one time I never got the card back, and and I got a bit annoyed. But weeks went by, and the reason they hadn't sent the card back is one Friday night I got home from school and I'm sitting in the lounge room listening to the Argonauts Club, and the announcer goes, "Now, boys and girls, we have a story from Norman Jorgensen of Narrogin in Western Australia." And she started reading it out. And I was so excited. I jumped around the room, I went around and grabbed my little brothers, dragged them in to make them listen to it, told my mum. She was so proud, head swelling up. And then about 5 minutes in, it occurred to me I'd done something really stupid. I hadn't changed the principal's name, and I hadn't changed Mrs. Simpson's name, and I hadn't changed the name of the school or my name. And everyone in Australia's hearing me slag them off. And it was so embarrassing. And I just nearly died. I couldn't get out of bed to go to school on Monday morning, and I thought I was going to get beaten in front of the whole school. When I finally got to school, the principal was there in front of the assembly, and he calls out, doesn't say good morning boys and girls or anything like that, he just called out, "Norman Jorgensen, come up the front now." And I was shaking like a leaf. I went up the front and he grabbed me by the hair, and he said, or by the shoulder, and he goes, "Norman here, he's had a story read on the ABC about our school. We're very proud of him. Well done, boy, sit down." And that was it. And I suddenly became really popular because no one else had ever heard of anyone in Narrogin having a story on the ABC. And kids came up to talk to me at morning tea time, including girls. First time in my life, girls talked to me. And I thought, that's all it takes. Write some stories and girls will talk to you. And so I've been doing it ever since for exactly that reason.
Very funny. Okay. Of all the characters you've created in your many books, do you have a favourite, and why?
I wrote The Smuggler's Curse a couple of years ago, and it's about a boy called Red Reed who lives in Broome in the old days up in 1898, and Broome's a pearling town way up in the north of Australia. That's where I was born. Anyhow, Red's mum owns a tavern called the Smuggler's Curse, and he helps out there after school. He washes glasses and sweeps up and things like that. Then one day he overhears his mother out on the balcony talking to Captain Bowen, a famous sea captain, and she sells him to Captain Bowen for $20 as a cabin boy. And that's quite a shock because he thought he and his mum got on quite well. So Monday morning he's taken down to the jetty, put on this black sailing ship and whisked away to sea as the cabin boy. And none of the crew want him there because they're hardened sailors and he's a small boy. They're quite mean to him, and the first thing they do is make him climb up to the top of the mast, and he gets seasick, and turns out that Captain Blackbone is not just a regular sailor, he's a notorious smuggler, and the customs are after them. And so even before they're out of Australian waters, customs are chasing after them and shooting at them. And they get away from that, and they go up to Singapore to do some deals. They do some gun running and smuggling whiskey and things like that. And Red gets caught up in all sorts of adventures, in storms at sea and with headhunters and colonials trying to shoot him and wild animals trying to eat him. And he survives, and he grows up as the books go on. He gets older and older, more and more brave, and he's not that much older. And Red is my hero because he's like me, but a brave version of me. When I was his age, I was a snivelling coward, but Red is everything I would have liked to have been. And back then, and Captain Bowen, the swashbuckling hero that he is, he's like a pirate. He's like I really like to be now. When I run away to sea, I want to be like Captain Bowen. So, two answers there.
Okay. And can you just bring your whole pile of books to sit in front of you so we can see? So,
the canon of my work is one of my publishers called it.
So which one came? Yeah, which one came first?
Oh yes, very first was this thing called Ash the Outback. It's comic stuff.
Yeah, closer. Thank you.
And I wrote that years ago when I was working in a bookshop called the Singing Tree Bookshop, and we were surrounded by the very best and the very worst of children's books. And one day a really bad book came in, and I said to one of my co-workers, "God, look at this rubbish. I could have written that." He said, "I bet you couldn't." So I sat down with my pen and paper and I wrote the first draft of Ash the Outback. And it was illustrated by a cartoonist called Alan Longalon, and it sold really, really well. I based it on Tintin, or Asterix, as you can see. Did you see the creator of Tintin died this last week?
Yeah, that was sad.
It was 90-something, right?
Yeah.
And I had reluctant readers in mind because boys weren't reading, and reading was dying, but they were reading Asterix books, and so I copied the style of Asterix, but I made it as Australian as I possibly could.
You used to brainstorm ideas with David Turton.
Yes, absolutely. He was the owner of the bookshop. Once a week we'd go out for dinner, and the three of us sit around and brainstorm, and it was a lot of fun because he was from a different generation to me, and he had all these other stories I hadn't heard of, and he knew a lot of Australian references, which we put in the book. After that, my life, I did three of those. Ash on Parade. Ash on Parade.
Yep.
Ash the Great Escapes. And then my life changed, and I wrote this thing called In Flanders Fields. And it's a simple story of a young soldier in the First World War. It's all done in black and white like this. And this young soldier sees a robin caught in the barbed wire out in no man's land and screeching and crying in fear and pain. And he puts a white flag of truce on the end of his rifle, and he walks out into no man's land and he rescues this bird and lets it fly away, warms it and it flies away. And he walks back to his own trenches. And as he walks back, he hears the German soldiers singing Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht, because it's Christmas. And when he gets back to his own trench, the Australians are singing Silent Night, Holy Night, all is calm, all is bright. And that's all there was to it. It's a really simple story, but it ended up with that little gold circle, Book of the Year.
I'm still waiting for my second earring.
I've got it here, I'll show you.
Irene King has just said, In Flanders Fields, the book that makes teachers cry.
Used to make me cry. Until I did a cartoon version of it when the robin gets shot and they eat it for Christmas. There's what you get.
Wonderful.
Only 4 West Australians have ever won that in 70 years. I'm so proud of it. I show it to kids whenever I'm doing school talks, always. Not to show off, even though I am showing off like mad, but to let kids know that if you're not particularly good at sport, you can still win an Olympic-like medal for writing, using imagination for drawing and painting, like Brian Harrison Lever did for the illustrations in it. It's not just all about swimming up and down a black line at 100 metres. And so, yeah, as Jan said, I need to win another one so she can get some earrings made out of them. But I keep trying. It's so hard.
It's challenging with all these new young scribby talented folks coming out of the woodwork too. You've got your work cut out for you.
And Meg McKinley wrote to me the other day because I had a complaint about it, and she said, you know how to do it. Stop writing rollicking pirate stories and write something with heart that you know you're capable of. But I'd rather write rollicking stories to have fun. It's about me having fun. And hopefully you reading my books and having fun as well.
Okay, so after In Flanders Fields changed your life, what was next?
Call
of the Osprey?
I think it was Call of the Osprey, which is a gentle story of a friendship between an old man and a boy. And obviously the sea has had a lot of influence on me. I made one of the characters, I called him Captain Stevenson, named after Robert Stevenson, who wrote Treasure Island.
Open it and show us the picture of it.
Oh, yes, sure. This is also by... Isn't that gorgeous? Watercolours by Brian Harrison Lever.
And the next page? The captain? That's
Oh,
him.
yeah, there's the captain. Brian used himself as the model for the captain.
Yeah, you can tell.
You can tell he looks exactly like that. Yeah. He also used his own son Tom for the model of In Flanders Fields. That's what Tom looks like.
Handsome young man.
Yes, he was 17 at the time. He's the same age as all the soldiers which were getting sent away to the war. So Brian found it very moving working on that.
And then you ventured into picture books with James.
Yes, and that was so much fun. James Foley was on this program last week. You know how talented he is. But he hadn't done anything before. The two of us met, and I suggested we work together on The Last Viking, and he went along with it. And I did a sigh of relief when I realised how talented he really was. I thought he could draw, but there's so much going on in his head. It's like a volcano. And so he actually is responsible for a lot of the bad jokes that are in this story as well. Again, we used to meet quite regularly and brainstorm, and I enjoyed that very, very much, brainstorming with him. He's as mental as anything, even though he pretends to be quite sensible dad of a 2-year-old.
Kelly Canby's just asked if red is your favourite colour too.
That never occurred to me. No, black's my favourite colour after black barn.
Yeah, fair enough.
And James used me as the model for the granddad. You can see him there. Can you imagine me with a beard? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cheeky
And that
bugger.
looks like the hallway to our house.
It does very much like the hallway. How were we doing?
Yeah.
I did these two. They were based on me growing up. After we left Narrogin, we went to live in Kalamunda in the hills. And the adventures of Mike and Woody, two schoolboys, were about 14, 13. They're based on me and my best friend Alan Newton, and the adventures are the sort of stuff I got up to with Ian, Bruce and Colin, my little brothers, building go-karts and fighting and getting into all sorts of mad mischief. And the idea for A Fine Mess came from that poster on the wall there. Can you see it?
Yep.
Those two, Laurel and Hardy, Darren Laurel and Oliver Hardy, who were famous comedians back in the early days of the movies. They started making movies in silent times and then made them right up to the 1950s. It's probably the tax department. And I read this one and imagining what it would be like being called Oliver Hardy, and it was about the dad. It wasn't going to be a kid's book, but Michael, his son, took over. He became more and more important to me, and I could relate to Michael more. So he eventually became the hero of it, and everything in his life goes completely wrong, just like mine when I was a kid. Probably just like yours as well. Kids don't have much freedom, do they?
I know you said recently you got a royalty check, and Jack's Island, despite it having been published for, 12 years now?
Yes.
Is still a bestseller?
Surprisingly, not surprisingly at all. The reason it is a bestseller is it gets studied in schools. So many English departments are using it with grade 5, 6, 7s, 8s, and even some 9s, and they study it. And then remember my friend Denise Dewing, who was doing it with her class of grade 7s at Chewett Hill Primary, spent a whole year working on it. And they didn't just, it's set in the 1940s in World War II, and they didn't just read it and discuss it. They did everything to do with it. They made the food from the 40s, they listened to music of the 40s and watched films from the 40s, and the kids got completely enmeshed in 1940s Australia, and they seem to like it. In fact, most kids do like it, even though you have to study it. I remember when I was at school, one of the books we studied was Lord of the Flies. I haven't been able to look at it since. It's the worst thing I've ever read in my life, and mostly because we did it in depth, I think.
The lovely thing about Rottnest is that when these COVID-19 restrictions are lifted and it's not a quarantine island, you can actually go there and visit, and the students seem to like going around all the landmarks.
I should tell you about it, yeah. We know about it. Jack's Island is about my father. When he was a boy, in World War II had started, and the Australian government was worried about the Japanese invading Australia. And so they decided that they'd turn Rottnest Island into a fortress. They put the huge big naval guns on the hills, they landmined all the beaches, they put machine guns everywhere, barbed wire, and they sent all these soldiers over there. And to do all this, they needed workers. So my granddad was taken from the army and sent to work. They built roads and the runway and the barracks. And he took his family with him, Jack and his brother Rob and their sister Norma. And they spent several years on the island while all this work was being done. And Jack had the best time. And they had a teacher called Mr. Palmer, who I named after my old headmaster, who has one teacher school there. And he was sick a lot of the time because he was quite elderly. So when he was sick, the kids didn't have to go to school. So they just went and played adventures, had the time of their lives. And they went swimming every day, and they built canoes and go-karts, and they really, really enjoyed themselves.
Xavier has just asked if you have any Viking swords, and I know you have, but I imagine they're probably locked away safely. Are they in a cabinet?
Yes, I've got a Viking sword, and it is locked in the cabinet over in the corner there. I won't get it out and show you because this is a children's program.
But a good question, Xavier.
Very good indeed, yes.
What I was going to suggest, because we've only got a few minutes left, is that you tell them about the most famous other writer that you met in your life, and the lovely coincidence that happened a couple of weeks ago when you won when you were inducted into the WA Young Readers Book Award Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Most famous writer I've ever met is James Foley.
But second to him.
Yeah. You know, I said I worked at the Singing Tree bookshop. One morning, Saturday morning, I went to work, even though I didn't have to, and because I like working there. And Roald Dahl came in the shop. He was doing a tour of Australia, and he was sat on a stool and talked to a couple of kids. And then he came up to me and said, "Could I order him a taxi?" He needed to get to the theatre in Perth because he was doing a performance for kids who won a competition to go and see him.
The Regal Theatre in Sydney.
Regal, that's it, yes. And so I I did a thing in Black Books. I said, "No, I won't call you a taxi. I'll take you. Shop shut, everyone, get out." So all the people left, and I drove him in to the Regal, and he performed on stage, and I drove him back to the Sheraton Hotel where he was staying, and he said, "Do you want to come in and have a cup of tea?" So I sat at the reception in the reception area at the Sheraton Hotel having a cup of tea with Roald Dahl, and he was absolutely charming and lovely. And a lot of people said he was grumpy and mean because he'd crashed his Spitfire in the war and had back pain all his life, and made him grumpy, of course. But he was really nice to me. He was nice to the kids, and so he was a member of the Hall of Fame, the West Australian Young Readers Book Award Hall of Fame, and I got inducted a few weeks ago along with him and about 5 others. And so being on the same list in the same breath of Roald Dahl is rather special. Can you imagine?
Pretty
so
amazing.
That was a major highlight. Yeah.
Pretty amazing. Okay, so I'm aware that we were a bit slow starting because, as I said, we're so inept with this. So let's go back to where we started at the beginning.
Before we just finish, on Friday, tomorrow, Karen Blair is...
Day after tomorrow.
Tomorrow,
tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah, Karen Blair is doing this, and she's lovely. She's well worth listening to, and just her talent is immense. She'll probably draw some stuff, and it takes about 30 seconds. Yeah, I'm amazed at her talent.
Yep.
Well, we're going over the corner here.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll show you mine first. In The Last Viking Returns, there is a scene where young Newt and all the family go to Viking World. And that Viking World is one of these machines, test your strength machine. Can you see it there?
Yep.
Oh, there it is, even better.
Yep.
And so when we launched this a few years ago, I made one of these machines for the kids to play with at launch, and I've still got it. Here it is in the corner. So what we can finish, any of those old enough remember films by J. Arthur Rank, or the guy who used to bang the gong?
Well, I might have the camera upside down. Oops. Told you we were novices. Okay, so we'll go out with a bang.
Yeah, and we can win Newt, Prince of Vikings, Freya, Thor, Viking God, King Harold, Bluetooth, Lagertha. We'll see if we can get up to Lagertha. She's from the Vikings TV series, which you're not allowed to watch.
So you're going to thank everyone for listening?
Indeed. Do I look like Thor, like Helmsworth?
Yeah. So thank everyone. Thank you, everyone.
So yeah, thank you all for attending and listening to me ramble on. I hope you.
Hope it all works out.
Yeah, we worked out 30 minutes went by fairly quickly, didn't it? Even though we started a bit late.
Okay.
You ready?
Yep.
Oh, how was that?
Yay, well done.
Bye.
Bye.
Nice to talk to you.